Good afternoon, I'm Simon Sporter and welcome to our latest in our series of videos. This afternoon I've got Andrew Nixon with us. He is from the Happy Lane Fund. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be on. Thank you for inviting me on.
That's a pleasure. So what we try to do here is bring interesting topics to the tennis community, to venues and clubs across the country. And I was told about your initiative and the initiative you organized with your colleagues at your club and the members at your club. And I was blown over by it. So start by just tell me a bit about yourself, if you would.
Yeah, sure. Well, my day job, I run a marketing agency, but like many of your viewers, I'm sure your members, I sort of become a serial volunteer for things. And once you start saying yes to things, you kind of more comes along, doesn't it? So in terms of tennis, I joined Bristol Central Tennis Club, which is right in the middle of Bristol, in 2019, so my early 40s. I joined the committee perhaps a year later, became the club secretary a bit after that, and I'm now the chair. So yeah, that's how I've got into tennis.
Okay. And tell me, so we're Happy Lane Fund. Where did that come from? What was that all about? Where did
Yeah,
the
well,
idea come from and what is it?
I will. I'll tell you the story of it because the story
Please.
I think explains what it is quite well and the concept. And I'd really like your members to sort of understand that concept because I think some people might get excited by it about replicating it. So in a nutshell, the Happy Lane Fund is designed to provide financial support to people, clubs, organisations offering tennis to people who wouldn't otherwise normally be able to play. So obviously people with disabilities or on low incomes, so inclusive tennis, in other words.
Okay.
It's in the Avon area. So Avon is a tennis county. It's not a real county. It's a tennis county covering Bristol, Bath, North Somerset, South Gloucestershire. So it is local, but it's a concept that I think could be carried out anywhere. Um, yeah. So shall I talk about the origins
So,
of it?
so tell me, where did it
Yep.
come from? Did you set it up? It was just your idea?
Yeah.
Because I believe it came from during the COVID period that
Yeah,
people
sort
would
of.
like
Yeah.
to forget about, but it kind of you saw an opportunity.
Yes, pretty much. Well, the stories of I'll give the story briefly. So Bristol Central, we're a small friendly club, and we've got four courts, but we're in a quite a wealthy area. We're always oversubscribed, and we're well managed, and we've built up. We've got good financial reserves. So we came out of COVID in a much better financial position than we expected to be in.
Right.
And basically, at the AGM in 2021, our members decided to set aside £15,000 of surplus to go to a good cause. So I was the club secretary and I volunteered to find that good cause, but it had conditions. And the conditions were it had to be tennis related, because that's part of the constitution of our club.
Yes.
We wanted it to be local. We wanted it to have a lasting impact, and really we wanted something tangible to show so that the members could say, we did that. And that actually proved quite a lot harder than I expected to do that, because I mean at that point I knew nothing at all about inclusive tennis. I literally googled tennis charities and I spoke to some big charities, and they are fantastic, but when I would say to them, if I gave you £15,000, what could you do locally?
Yes.
It wasn't easy to give me an answer. It would kind of go into the general running costs for the most part, so it wouldn't have that tangible thing. But then I met, you may know Helen Abbott.
Yes, for
She's a
sure.
fantastic. Well,
Founder of Walking Tennis. Of course, I know
founder
her.
of, founder of Walking Tennis. She lives just around the corner from me. She's the open court lead in Avon, and she got me onto a charity called West Sport, who get people active, and they run all the parks tennis in Bristol. So anyway, I went along to watch them running this fantastic session uh, for people with learning disabilities in the park. And they're the kind of people that are loving tennis, but they're the kind of people who just wouldn't join a club.
Yes.
Run by a guy called Richard Coleman. I spoke to him. So I said to him, okay, Richard, I'll give you £15,000. What will you do with it? And his answer was, well, I don't know, because they don't have enormous costs to run this thing. The parks are free. They just need a bit of money for the coaches, a bit of money for kit. So I was nearly in tears at this point. I was banging my head. I can't give this money away because the 15,000 is a funny amount. It's not enough to build something, a
Yes.
big capital project, but it was too much for a little session like this. So I was, I was in despair, but I suddenly had a eureka moment, and I realized that what we could do is create a pot, because there are lots and lots of these little groups all over the place doing amazing things in inclusive tennis. So
Sure.
disability groups, projects for people on low incomes, and they don't need a lot of money. They just need a few £100 here and there for things like hiring facilities, paying a coach, servicing a wheelchair, uh, hiring transport, buying equipment. But getting grants for little things like that is actually a bit of a pain, can be prohibitively bureaucratic, especially for volunteers. So the
Yeah.
idea is this pot is that any group offering some kind of inclusive tennis can apply and rapidly get small amounts.
Okay.
So I put that to Rich to West Sport, and they loved it, and they were able to manage it. So they manage the fund free of charge. So it's a West Sport thing. So we handed them over the money,
So
and created
you handed over all of the money to
all
this,
£15,000, and that's the initial pot.
and
But the great
and
thing
they are
about
a charity in their own right.
they are a charity in their own right, and they did add some of their own money as well.
So
Um,
that's sped up the whole process, that you didn't have to set up your own charity, and you didn't have the trustee issues and all of the uh, bureaucracy around setting up a charity, and the speed, because that takes time, and the hassle of it.
exactly, that's exactly right. So this is where clubs might be thinking, okay, so we don't have to take on all that difficult stuff. These are professionals. They've also got all the contacts. They're good at putting people together, and they're used to managing funds, and they've got all the bureaucracy. They know about all the hoops you have to go through. So
Okay.
we hand it all over to them. I mean, the other good thing about a pot is that you can keep adding to it. So that's where we keep having the involvement of the club. So we can just be people who fundraise for it. So it ticked all the boxes, that idea. So it's local, Avon. It's tennis related, obviously,
Yes.
and it's a lasting legacy because we can keep adding to it. And then we made it a tangible thing. And this was another big important point: is we gave it a name, the Happy Lane Fund, and we've got this lovely branding, which I might be able to share with you to put on with the video.
Yeah.
Um, which was done by a student just who's associated with the club. It's lovely. And we called it the Happy Lane Fund rather than the Bristol Central Fund, because Happy Lane is actually our address, but of course only our members really know that.
Yes.
Um, so we wanted other clubs around the place to feel they could own it as well, and so that other tennis clubs might want to contribute, or anyone could contribute to it.
So
But our
the
members
Happy
know that.
Lane, so that's a fund
Yeah,
which your club put the initial money into,
yeah,
and then to the charity. You then paid
yes,
that money, and then on an ongoing basis, if you have some surplus funds as a club that you want to make a charitable contribution to this particular initiative,
yeah,
and or a fundraising event, for example, you would
yes.
then continue to fill that pot. And the idea is that potentially other organizations, clubs, or venues also in the area wouldn't feel that it was just all about you as a club. It was a broader idea that others may feel actually we are supportive of the idea as well, because we can see the amazing things that it's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. And in 2023, our club, Bristol Central, raised another £3,000 to go in it. And we did that through uh, voluntary member donations at the time of renewal and joining fees. We put a £10 from every joining fee into it. We do walking tennis, but that's all run by volunteers. We do it pay and play. And we put £1,000 of all the proceeds of that into it, and we had a big fundraiser day, which is absolutely fantastic. So having that focal point, we had uh, a doubles competition tournament, we had a coaching session, we had barbecue, raffle, we had a fantastic evening event. So it's a really good social thing for the club, and it gave us that focal point, raising money for the Happy Lane Fund. So
Okay.
yes, we put a further £3,000 in this year, and what I'm working on next is spreading the word of this to other Avon clubs,
Yes.
and that's going quite nicely. So, um,
And then
so
the Happy Lane Fund, that goes to the charity, and they then manage how to spend that money across your region.
right. Well, so what it is, I'll give you. We've funded 9 projects so far, so I think I'll tell you about those, and
Yeah,
that'll
tell
explain
me
it.
about how that bit works and
Yeah,
how they come back to you. Do you
yeah.
sign it off? Do you agree to it? Do you say that's the kind of thing you like to keep
It's
making
all
sure that you stay involved?
uh, it's all managed by Westport, and they vet the applications, or they go out and encourage people that they know would be good to apply.
Yes.
Uh, we don't, as a club, as a courtesy, they might run big ones by us, but they're professionals. We trust them to do it, and they give us a report at the end of the year. That's the agreement we've got,
Right.
to say these are the things we spent it on. So specifically, it's any groups. It could be a club, it could be a coach, it could be a charity, can apply for money from it. So, but the conditions are that it has to be for people with disabilities or long-term health conditions, people on low incomes, and from disadvantaged communities, or refugees. So those are the 3 kind of areas. So you have to be doing something for one of those, and you can apply to Westport, and they will grant you money out of the fund.
Okay, and
Um,
that could be so it's tennis related.
it has to
It
be
could
tennis
be
related. Yeah.
it could be at a tennis club, it could be at a park, or it could be at a leisure centre,
Yeah.
anywhere where tennis is happening. It could be for severely handicapped children, for example, who can't obviously hit a ball. They could be in a wheelchair with some serious disabilities, but they are able to engage in some way or other, even if it's just with tennis balls.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll give you some of the examples of the projects it's funded, and it will show you the range. So one really lovely use of it was a learning disability group that plays in the park normally. They were able to hire a community centre hall so they could play in the winter.
Right.
So it's a few £100, but difficult to get hold of. So that they apply for the fund. There's different sessions around Bristol. Bristol has some deprived areas. There's 3 different sessions for families on low incomes, run by professional coaches. So coaches guarantee the income. There's a session for Ukrainian refugees that's been funded by it. Um, we bought 2 Lusu sensory tennis kits. I don't know if you know about those, but they are big kit bags full of stuff for people with very severe
Sure.
disabilities.
Yes.
And that was done for a disability festival in Bath. And now there's a club in Bath that's still got that kit. There's a disability festival at a club just on the outside of Bristol that launched their new inclusive program. So they needed a few £100 to get that going. And there's a regular session for autistic and neurodiverse people at another club in Bristol, paying for the courts and the coach. So there's all sorts of different things,
Okay,
that
so
gives you an idea of the spread.
and at your club, when you came up with this idea at the AGM, was everybody supportive? Was there any pushback? Did you have to spend time with the minority of people just to get them to buy into the projects? Mostly, most people agree to things, and you spend twice as much time getting the last few to come on board. Was that your experience?
Well, it wasn't too bad actually. The main thing was the initial vote to at the AGM to give it some of this money to a charity. When I came back with this idea of the Happy Lane Fund and the pot, everyone just loved it straight away.
Yes.
There wasn't any pushback at all on it. Everyone just could see what a simple but really good idea it was, and how much good it could do on an ongoing basis. Um, so, there wasn't any pushback at all to the actual Happy Lane Fund. No, we'd done all the hard work deciding we were going to give some money away the year before.
Okay. And obviously, it's working, as you say, brilliantly locally. You'd like to roll it out to some more of the clubs in your region as well. That's kind of stage 1 of your expansion of your plan. Uh, Obviously, we we have lots of members in our volunteer community, and you're part of that community. And it would be great that if other clubs, many clubs and venues struggle financially, but some of them like to have worthy causes, like to be doing something for their community, particularly. We're very community orientated, as you know.
Yeah,
So what
absolutely.
what do you think could come next? Do you think that
Yeah,
we could sort of introduce this idea to clubs and sort of talk them through it? What's your real ambition here?
I'd love that to happen. I mean, what comes next? I mean, locally, basically, and this does apply nationally. Locally, there's two taps in a thing like this. There's money in and there's money out. So one thing clubs can do is money in, and that's where I want to get other clubs doing fundraisers and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Um, the money out, the way people can get involved with the money out is raising awareness. If they're involved with people who are volunteers are often involved in other things. If they're involved with charities and they think, oh, you could benefit from this, get hold of them. They'll put you in touch with a coach or a club. That'd be great. So clubs can do with that. But the reason it's great to talk today is I think it could be replicated on a wider level across the country. Just that once people grasp that idea of the pot, I don't think you need that big £15,000 initial investment that we had at all.
Sure.
You just need people, if you could get it going with £1,000, there's a few things you do need, I think. One is you probably want something like Westport. Now, Westport are Avon, but
Yes.
they are what's called an active partnership, and there's something like 40 of them all over the
Yeah,
country.
I've heard of the
Yeah,
idea. Yes.
yeah. So something like that is probably ideal because they have the expertise in managing funds. Um, but there's a lot going for tennis people and tennis clubs that really come together, I think, with this. Different factors that are quite unique to tennis. First of all, there's the game itself. It's you can play it in all sorts of different ways. It's already adapted to wheelchair tennis, visually impaired tennis, deaf tennis. There's walking tennis. So the game itself is really inclusive. Um, it's great exercise. It stimulates you physically and mentally. It gets you out in the fresh air. It gives you a good social life. And that's a really important part of all these things is the social side of it. And and there's venues everywhere. So there's clubs, obviously, but there's also municipal courts, parks,
Yes.
and actually you could play tennis in a hall. You don't even need a net to play some form of tennis, depending on the people. Um, so there's the game itself. Then there's clubs. There's these things clubs all over the country, full of volunteers, a ready-made community of volunteers who make things happen. So it's perfect for fundraising, for contacts. And then you've got tennis coaches, which I think are quite unique as well. Um, and they're often attached to clubs. Now, tennis coaches, one of their big challenges is, where is paying the bills. Um, and I do think with this approach, you can actually incentivize coaches to do more inclusive tennis because when they're getting funding from a Happy Lane Fund or something similar, then they know they're going to get their money however many people turn up for that session. And that respect, it can be more reliable than private individual coaching. So I think if you take this approach to tennis coaches, there's potentially a whole load of people there who could start delivering this more inclusive tennis.
Yes.
Um, and then the other thing we've got is networks. So your network is a great example, but also the LTA counties. So a bit like your community, the Happy Lane Fund isn't directly an LTA Avon tennis thing, but it sits really nicely along with it. And clubs are connected to each other through that, and they've got those communication channels. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, so I think all those things are just there, and something like this, the final piece of the jigsaw, all you need to plug in is an organisation like Westport or an active partnership,
Yes.
and I'm sure it could be done all over the country.
Great. So look, amazing what you and your club have achieved thus far. As you say, we can talk about all of this. We've got lots of people who are interested. We've got the counties, we've got the clubs, and the volunteers within those clubs, and there'll be lots of interest. So I hope you all enjoy the video that Andrew and I have just put together, and you can contact us to find out more. And hopefully I'll bring Andrew to a question and answer session where we can maybe take this to the next level. But thank you very much, Andrew,
Very happy to.
and a great
Thank you.
start, more than a start. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon.